morning, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome in across the continent for another very exciting Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants broadcast. If you're joining us for the first time, as so many of you are today, we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. Now, everything we do goes to our YouTube channel, so if you want to catch this program or like 4,000 others in 3 weeks or 3 years, you can head there and do just that. There's so much to explore and discover. But I'm so glad of all days that you're joining us today, because today marks the beginning of Ocean Week, which is our biggest week as an organization every single year. Combined, we've got 20 programs featuring some of the coolest scientists and explorers on planet Earth. But particularly, we are starting off today with a bang with Justine Hudson in Ocean Week Canada. Now, Ocean Week Canada is hundreds and hundreds of events, coast to coast to coast across this amazing country. I really encourage you, check out their website, check out the Canadian Ocean Literacy Coalition that makes it all possible. They have partnered with us for years, and we are so thrilled to have them back on an epic series of 5 broadcasts with 5 incredible women all week long at 1 Eastern. Now, the biggest program, the one that garnered the biggest audience, and not really shocking, is today with Justine, because Justine is a biologist with Fisheries and Oceans Canada who studies the amazing beluga whale and other whales in Canada's north. I've been very lucky to see beluga whales in person in my life. It's one of the most magical experiences I've ever had, and I'm so excited to dive in with you and Justine to learn more about this incredible creature. So, without further ado, I'm going to zip my lip. Thank you so much for joining us today, Justine, and welcome back to the broadcast.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for inviting me here today.
Are so happy to have you. It's such a great series, and you're the perfect person to kick us off. I know you've got a lot to share with us. If you want to bring up your presentation, you can. And while you're doing that, I'll note too, we do have a Kahoot in the broadcast today. So between Justine's talk and the Q&A, we got a little 4-question quiz to test your understanding and have some fun. So feel free to bring up that game pin, and we can dive in with that at about the 20-25 minute mark. But we are pretty much all set to go. Justine, if you just want to drag that banner, you're good to go, and you can take us away. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks again for inviting me. So today I thought I would talk a little bit about what it's like to be a marine biologist studying marine mammals in the Canadian Arctic. Things are just taking a second to switch over here.
It wants to work. It's thinking about it. This is the joy of live broadcasting. It's go a little wrong. Otherwise, you're having no fun. We'll see.
Let's see.
I find smacking the computer is very emotionally satisfying. It doesn't technically work either.
Oh, there we go.
Hey, cool. You're good.
All right. So yes, I'm a marine biologist with Fisheries and Oceans Canada. So I study a few different Arctic species. So I mainly study belugas and narwhal in the Arctic, but I also study bowhead whales, walrus, and ring seals. And killer whales, although they're not an Arctic species, as in they don't spend their entire year in the Arctic, they have been showing up in the Arctic more frequently with climate change. So we do study them in the Arctic as well. So as a biologist working for Fisheries and Oceans, one of our goals, I should say, is to study the health of the different populations within the Arctic. And to do that, we need to know a few things about these species. So for example, we need to know where they live and where they migrate to, for example. We need to know how many animals are in the populations to make sure that the populations are staying stable or increasing, because we don't want to see them decreasing. We need to know things like, what do they eat? Because if they're not eating the proper food, that can make them sick or make them unhealthy. And of course, we want to make sure that all the populations in Canada stay healthy. And that moves me to the next one. Are they healthy? Are they stressed from different things in their environment? Are there diseases that we should be concerned about? So all of these things we need to understand about marine mammal populations. And of course, is their environment safe? Are they being exposed to different contaminants or noise? All of these things we need to understand and have an understanding of while we're studying the populations. So to do that, we get to do a lot of fun stuff. So we get to go up into the Arctic, and a lot of the places that we go to don't necessarily have people living there. So there are communities in the Arctic, of course, but where we go, there's not usually any infrastructure. So we set up these camps, and this is an example of some of the camps that we set up. So you can see we're right on the coast so that we have easy access to the animals that we're studying. And you can also see that there's not much else in the area. And this is just another example of a remote Arctic field camp that we've set up in different areas. So we go to a place for a summer for a few weeks. we set up our camp, and then as soon as our field research is done, we'll dismantle the camp and go back to wherever we're based from. So I thought I would go through some of the ways that we study Arctic marine mammals. So one of the main things that we've been doing recently is using drones to study marine mammals. So I've been flying drones for the last, how long has it been? 8 years. And it's one of my favorite ways to study marine mammals. So here's a video that we collected a few years ago. And of course, this is a beautiful photo of some belugas swimming past our camp, but we can actually get a lot of information from this video. So for example, we can see how many whales are within this group of belugas. And if we look closer, we can see that there's little baby belugas throughout the group as well. So we can see how many babies are being born per year. And if we took photos of this group, for example, we could also zoom in and see if any of these whales have any markings on them so that we can see if these same groups of whales are coming back to the same location every year. I'll just let this video play out for a second here.
It's so cool.
I don't know if it's sorry.
When seeing this from the air is just so fantastic. And you see these from the plane when you fly into somewhere like Churchill too, like they're so white. It sounds so ridiculous, but it's amazing.
Yeah, they stand out so much. And it's interesting. So in this video, can you see my cursor?
We can indeed.
No?
Yep.
Yeah, you can. So if you look right here, there's actually a group of fish too. So if it's really interesting to see the belugas. We would think that they would be like hunting the fish, but they had no interest in this school of fish that was right next to them. So we're getting a lot of interesting behavior with the drones, which is really nice. And of course, we're also seeing things that we wouldn't necessarily see if we were on a boat at surface level. So for example, if you were just watching this bowhead whale from a boat, you would never know that it had I won't even say it yet. I'll wait for the video to play out here.
Oh, what a tease. Let's see.
So you can see that it's just about to break the surface of the water. And then right next to it is a little baby, which we would have never seen if we were on a boat. Of course, we would have seen the blow afterwards, but we wouldn't necessarily know how big this baby bowhead was. So this was really cool to see from the drone. And of course, this is interesting because we get to see the behavior of the baby bowhead and its presumed mother. And then we can also look at the markings on the mother, and we can make note of, okay, this whale had an offspring on this year, and to see how often that happens with individual whales. And so I mentioned earlier that we also take photos to see if we're seeing the same whales over and over again. And this photo is from a place called Cumberland Sound. And these belugas belong to the Cumberland Sound beluga population. And so we've had a group up there taking drone photos for years. This first photo was taken in 2017. And you can see that this beluga has like a really interesting mark on it. It almost looks to me like a video game controller, which is pretty funny. And we saw the same whale again in 2018. And I think this whale has also been spotted like 2 more years since these photos were taken. So we've seen it in at least 4 different years, which is really cool. So we can get an estimate of how many whales belong in a population if we can see the same whales over and over and over again. So that's how we use drones to study marine mammals, but we also study marine mammals with planes. So one of the main things that we need to know when we're studying marine mammal populations, and this is just not Arctic populations, this is populations all over the world, but we need to know how many individuals are in a population so that we can make sure that those numbers stay stable. And one of the, I guess, most traditional ways that we've done so is by flying in airplanes. So this is a little twin otter plane that we use to fly surveys. So these planes fly really low, and in the past, you'd have observers on the planes counting with little counters how many whales or seals or walrus that they see. But now we've gone away from using observers, and now we take photographs, and then we look at the photographs after the fact. But you can see that these planes have little bubble windows so that you can literally stick your head in and look down so that you can see and count all of the critters that you're trying to study from the airplane. And these planes would fly for, 8 hours a day, sometimes longer, just going back and forth, flying in transects so that you can count all of the animals within a certain area. So like I said, we've gone away from observers counting the whales while they're flying the surveys, and we've gone towards taking photographs and then counting the animals from the photographs. So here's an example of what the photos would look like. So here you can see that there's 2 narwhal here that are very clearly narwhal. You can see the tusks, they're very clear. And then in the top left corner, you have this little blob of a, I don't even know what. I'm assuming it's a narwhal, but you can see that it gets a little bit tricky to count these photos or count the animals in the photos, because you'll have very clear examples of animals, but then you'll have some things that you're questioning. But narwhals are at least a little bit easier because they have their tusks, and narwhal and belugas are they stand out against the blue water pretty well. Here's another example of a photo of some narwhal. So I put this here because I thought it was a good example of not only can we see how many animals or count the animals in the photos, but we can get a sense of the sex ratio, so male versus females for narwhal and offspring. So for example, this whitish narwhal in the photo is an adult, because narwhals actually get more white as they age. So we can tell that this is an adult narwhal. It doesn't have a tusk, so we presume that it's female. I will say that about 10% of female narwhals have tusks, so it's not an exact science, but it gives us a general idea. So we can presume that this is a female adult, and then these 3 narwhal with it, I can't see any tusks, but that being said, tusks grow as narwhals grow, so they could just be tiny and just not noticeable in the photographs. But we can tell that there's 3 juvenile narwhals with this adult. So we can get not only a sex ratio, but an age ratio as well. And then we also use aerial surveys or flying surveys in planes to count seals as well. So this is a survey that happened over the winter time. And you can see from this photo that it can get a little bit hard to count seals from airplanes because they just look like black dots on the ice. And it's hard to tell them apart from, say, a rock. So to deal with this issue, we've been putting on infrared cameras, which can sense heat. And then this is what the same photograph looks like. So we can tell that those aren't rocks because they are giving off heat. And you can see that there's at least a few individuals here. I am not a seal counter, so I don't know exactly how many, but I think when I first got this photo, the person it belonged to said there were 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm going to go with that. And you can see that this little one here looks like maybe a young pup because it's white. All right, so now I've kind of gone through how we count whales and seals from drones and survey planes. But this is a new technique that we started to use. And this is kind of my fun party trick. So if you have an iPhone, or I think you can maybe do this from all phones and maybe even Google Maps, but I haven't tried. But this is a screenshot from my iPhone personally. If you look up a place called Cunningham Inlet and you zoom in all the way, this is what you'll see.
Can I just say that the first time you did this with me in one of our broadcasts, I've used this as an example in like dozens of talks since as like one of the wildest things I've seen, that you can see this from space. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Sorry, I just got water down the wrong way. But yes, it's super cool. This is actually my party trick. I'm really fun at parties. But I think this is so cool. So we know that you can see belugas in particular from space because we can zoom in on our iPhones and we can see it ourselves. But as scientists, we needed to know if the animals that we're counting are like representative of what you could see with either drones or aerial surveys. So basically what I mean by that is if I count 50 whales in this photo that you see here, would I see 50 whales in an aerial survey or with the drone? So we did some research to find out if we could use satellite imagery as a way to estimate the number of whales in a population. So the first part of this little study that we did was we made fake belugas out of wood and a white fabric. They were life-size. They were a pain to bring anywhere, but in the name of science, we got it done. So what we did was we took these life-size beluga cutouts and we took them to a place in, I think technically it's in Ontario, the Experimental Lakes, and we sunk them to different depths and also in clear versus turbid waters. And then we got a satellite image of those sunken beluga cutouts to see if we'd be able to see them. And it turns out that we are able to see them even at different depths. So you can see here, can't remember which depths these all are, but we could see them, I think, up to 4 meters, if I'm not mistaken. But we could see them. So that tells us that we would be able to see belugas at depth. They didn't have to be at the surface. So we could get a more accurate estimation of the number of belugas in a population if we counted them from satellite images. And then the next thing that we did was we went to Churchill for one of our field programs, and we flew a drone and we flew a transect of the drone. So it's basically like a grid pattern. And we got the drone to take photos in this grid pattern and then compared the number of whales that we saw in our grid to a satellite image taken at the same time to see if the numbers were similar. And it turns out they were similar. So that basically told us that we could use satellite images to count whales from space. And now that's what we're doing. We're using satellite images of huge areas, which we wouldn't be able to cover easily with a survey plane using satellite images, which is really amazing. All right. So next thing that we do, or next technique that we use to study whales, and this is going to be very specific to belugas in Churchill because they are a special group of belugas. We collect snot samples, and I'll show you what this looks like.
The romance of science.
So this is my friend and colleague. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I just said the romance of science, snot samples.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, this is my friend and colleague Karen, and she's collecting a snot sample. So for those of you that aren't aware, whales have noses, kind of similar to what we have, but instead of being in the front of our face, they're on the top of their head. Their blowhole is the equivalent of our nose. And when they come to the surface to breathe, they exhale some snot, and we collect that snot on a petri dish, and then we can use that sample to do a bunch of different analyses. So this is what Karen is doing here. She's collecting a snot sample that we were using at this time to study stress in this population. And when I say that this is very unique to Churchill, I mean that because this population of belugas is, I guess you could say, friendly. They approach boats on their own and they kind of swim behind the boat, like you can see in this video. Whereas if you go to other places, the belugas there are usually a little bit more skittish, so they usually don't approach boats like they do here. So this is very unique to Churchill. And then this is what the sample looks like. So you can see in the middle there, it looks like someone spit a loogie into the petri dish. And so we can use these samples to look at things like genetics. So we can tell if a whale was male or female. We can look at hormones. So we can tell if an animal was pregnant or not pregnant. We could tell if they were stressed. And we could look at things like disease to see if they have any diseases that we should be concerned of. And then another thing that we do is put tags on whales. So this here is an example of a suction cup tag. So it's exactly how it sounds. It's like the suction cups that you'd put like to hang things in your shower. I don't know if people do that anymore, but so I feel like that's maybe showing my age a little bit. But yeah, they're suction cups. So we use this long pole, and then you basically I don't want to say slam it down because that sounds not great, but you hit it on the whale and it sticks to the whale because the whale skin is so smooth. And you can see here that we're attempting to do this with a bowhead whale. We don't end up getting it, but you can kind of visualize what it would have looked like if we did. And then these tags allow us to get really great information about where whales are going and what behaviors they're doing. So just to give you an example, this is a different style of tag, but these were whales that were tagged in 2022. I can't remember what year this stops, but there are still some whales that have some tags on. But just to give you an idea, we tagged the whales in this area here, and then this is where they went. And you can see the time up here. And this work is really important because we need to know where whales are going to have an idea of their health and things that they're exposed to over their migration. So even though one area might be, a safe haven for whales, there might be other areas that might have things that could be detrimental to their health. So knowing where they're going at what times of the year is really important. And that's it. I hope I'm on time.
You're more than on time. You did fantastically, Justine. You left tons of time for a big Q&A. But feel free to come out of screen share so you can see us again, have a bit of a conversation. Thank you so much for such a deep dive into epic Arctic work. I mean, it's just such a special part of not just Canada, but the whole world. And any chance we get to showcase it and showcase belugas. I mean, there's a reason why we have the biggest audience in ocean for you. It's such a cool group of animals. So I encourage our classes. I grew up as a boy thinking about safaris, thinking about going to East Africa, Australia for wildlife. And like right in our backyard, we have some of the most stellar, amazing things on planet Earth. So if you get the chance to be on one of those beluga boats, it really will change you. I can't encourage it enough.
I agree.
Well, to begin, before we dive in with our big Q&A, we are going to start our Kahoot. So for those who are new to Kahoot, including you, Justine, the faster you answer, the more points you get. And what our classes win is our everlasting respect. So Justine's everlasting respect is worth quite a bit. We're going to dive in a second. And we've got some full classes joining in for this. So as a class, you can pick your answer together. And then we're going to dive in with Q&A. Miss DeHoo's class, Miss Riddle's class on YouTube, join in as well. Thank you all so much for being here. And let's get started. Justine, if you want to help us with any of these answers, you can give us little hints along the way, okay?
Okay, sounds good.
Here we go. Drum roll, please. Multi-select. So there's going to be more than one answer. Could be all of them. Could be two. Beluga whales can be found in the waters of which countries? Canada, the U.S., Mexico, or Antarctica? I bet the belugas, if they went to Mexico, would have a really nice time there. I don't think they get that far down, but it would be very toasty, right on the like a cabana sort of thing. On the Antarctic note, have you ever been to Antarctica in any of your work? Or you?
No, never. It's a dream.
It is a dream, and maybe it pertains to this question. There are different animals down there. Some of the species are linked, but like penguins, polar bears, totally different parts of this planet. Canada and the United States are our correct answers. Way to go. So the North, including Alaska, that's the U.S., of course. Let's see what that does. Lucky Panda is leading Rapid Panda. It's a panda podium at the top. All right. I hope we all get this right. One of the best ways to find belugas is from the air. I messed up the timing, so we got a little longer than usual. True or false? What do we think? And by the way, I checked Cunningham Inlet as we were talking, and it's wild. It's just amazing that you can see that from space.
It is. It's super cool.
I want to note, because famously, like the Great Wall of China is visible from space. It is not. It completely blends in with landscape. You would not find it, but you can see belugas. So there you go.
Wow, that's incredible. I would have never known.
They're very bright, and everybody got that right, of course. Good. I'm so glad the four of you, our four classes, were paying attention. Lucky Panda keeps our lead. We go to question 3. Belugas have no natural predators. We didn't talk about this, but I'm really curious what people think about things eating belugas. And maybe along the lines of a hint, Justine, have you ever seen any carnivory of beluga whales in your career or no?
Not of live belugas, but I've seen things eat dead belugas.
Okay, I've one of the best bits of a natural history documentary I've ever seen is a polar bear wading at a beluga hole and pulling the beluga out. So bears eat whales, which is a sentence that just sounds ridiculous, but is true, which is kind of cool. So Most of you got that right. Way to go. We go to our final question before we head to our online classes for a question. There's another multi-select, so some adaptations that blue whale or belugas have. Echolocation, thick blubber layer, white skin, or elongated tooth. That tooth might belong to someone else. Is there a set spot to see narwhal in the world? Like, is there like an iconic place for them? Because I would die. I would be so happy.
I don't know if there's an iconic place.
Okay.
I feel like they're tougher to come by. They prefer deeper water, so they're not coming to shore like belugas are, for example.
Interesting. So for most or quite a few whale species, there are a lot of places that are like the spot you can go see them. So that's good to know. Yeah. I'll have to keep searching and get on more of those Arctic boats. Maybe Justine will have me on as like a shoe shine boy, or like I can get them coffee while they're doing science. All right. Our winner is Lucky Panda. If you are Lucky Pandas, let us know who you are in the chat. Thank you so much for playing along. And now we're going to dive in with questions. We've got tons of time together. So our first one is from Miss Riddle's class. Do you name the whales that you follow? Is it like, Susan the whale, or what's the deal?
No, well, I shouldn't say that we don't name them. They'll have like numbers. So we're not calling belugas or bowheads Fred, for example, but they'll have numbers if we can identify them. So that we'll have our spreadsheet and we can easily find information on those whales.
Of all the fake names to come up with, Fred is really like top tier. Very nice. Thank you very much. It's really
I had to think on the spot there. I'm like, what's a good fake name?
Perfect, Beluga. I love this question. We get this for pretty much every animal or biologist that we work with. And it really depends on the amount of any individual animal there are. And certain times, like it's the actual field team. So like apes, people often give them names. Insects, people never give them names. There's just too many. So it really does depend. But I like where your head's at, guys. Thank you for the question. Miss Swan, we're coming to you guys live in a second, our grade 6s. We got another one from YouTube. Do you use AI in any way to help your counting? You talked about being a drone person for 8 years. So you're like the cutting edge drone pilot. What's the deal with AI? Are you using it yet or no?
That's a great question. So we are trying to. So with those survey photos and with the aerial survey photos, of course, you can imagine that it takes a ton of people power to be able to count all the whales in those photos. Especially for survey photos, it can be a huge area that you're looking at, and it can take a lot of time. So yes, we are trying to develop AI to count whales in these photos. We haven't perfected it yet, but we're getting closer. We're just like trying to get better at training the models.
I was going to say, in the essence of collaboration in the broadcast that we do, if you're keen, we actually had a broadcast with a group that's doing exactly this in the Serengeti for things like zebra and antelope. And
my gosh.
So if you want to connect, I'm happy to put you in touch. It's a very, there's a lot of whales, and the faster and more accurately we get this information, the better we can work to protect these species. So it's really counting is the essence of biology. Like if you are a person who goes out and is like, there's 5 blue jays in my backyard, you're like well on the path to being a biologist, which is very fun.
That's so true.
Justine, this has been so much fun. Geez, we're ripping through these. Miss Swan's class. Oh, you got your mic on. If you want to flick on your camera, you can, but you can come in just for a question audibly, whatever makes you happy. Hey guys. Let's see, maybe, kind of. Miss Swan, can you hear me now? We'll come back. We'll see if anything's going wrong. It sounds like something might be going wrong. You can always type in the chat as well on the side. There's lots of ways to get those questions in. So another one from YouTube while we're waiting. Do we know the population of belugas? Is there like a set number? Are we still looking for this? Is this what the counting's all about? What's the deal?
Yeah, so we do know or have an idea of the number of whales in populations, but there are 8 different populations in Canada. So every population will have a different number. Some are doing better than others. But we do try to do surveys roughly every 5 years so that we have an estimate of how the populations are doing in 5-year spans.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Do you partner with anyone for this? Like, is this just a Fisheries and Oceans thing, or like does the Canadian Wildlife Federation or some other organization get involved, or are you it?
No, we're not it. So I'm pretty sure Parks Canada helps with some of them. I think it depends on like where the work is being done and which species are being counted. So I know that some folks from DFO have done some polar bear surveys with other groups. I can't think of the group names off the top of my head, but it is usually in collaboration with other groups. And we do have community members, for example, if we're flying a survey from a specific community, we'll invite community members from those communities to come up and just kind of experience what it's like to count whales from the airplane, which is really cool.
Very, very cool, man. That is like one of the great side gigs of all time. We've got Miss Swan's class. You got the tech working, and you're all lined up. So if you want to come on in, you should be good to go. Let's check. Hi, guys.
Hi.
Hi. Yeah. Oh, okay. You're in, but your audio doesn't work now. So now your video works, but your audio doesn't. So I know it works in the test. You had a great question in the chat, so we'll say hi to you guys. Your first question is, what kind of boats do you use to study the whales? They look like a really neat little thing.
So for the most part, we use Zodiac. So they're air-filled boats for the most part, because of course we don't want to be running into any of the whales that we're studying. But we also use small boats like kayaks because it allows us to get closer to the whales. They don't make any noise, so they don't scare the whales off as easily. So I would say that those are the two main boats that we use. But we also use traditional canoes.
Yeah.
We've done some traditional canoes on some of our bowhead work and some metal boats. It kind of depends on whatever we have access to, because a lot of the places that we work to are really remote. So we kind of take whatever we can get sometimes.
Being in a traditional canoe surrounded by belugas has got to be one of the coolest experiences you can have in the world. So that's pretty special. I will say on the Zodiac note, so whenever we have Arctic or Antarctic explorers, the Zodiac is like the workhorse universal boat. And your plane you mentioned, the Twin Otter. So like anytime people need to get to any remote region of the planet, that plane is the plane that's used. And I'm not wrong. It's a Canadian plane. Like we rock. We have the best plane. So way to go for Bombardier and Twin Otter and everything else. So, cool, guys. All right. Keep them coming in the chat, Miss Swan's class, and I'll bring you up to say hi every time I bring you on. We've got some more from YouTube first. Riker in Mr. Who's class, welcome in Edmonton. He wants to know, do belugas fight with their heads? Is there any sort of challenges they give to each other or no?
Oh, that's interesting. Do belugas fight with their heads? I don't know. We do know that belugas like rake each other with their teeth. Often when we are like using or flying the drones, we'll see like these rake marks on belugas, and it's assumed that it's like one beluga kind of scraping the other with its teeth. I don't know if it's an aggressive thing though. It could be like their form of play. But we do notice that, but I've never seen any fighting. Maybe they just get along really well.
Wow. I've never heard the two thing before. That's super cool. See, you learn something new every day you get to host Exploring by the Sea of Your Pants. A great other question from our chat, and we're going to come into Miss Swans right after this. Can some whales lay eggs? And maybe we'll dive into mammal biology in general with this a little bit, because I love this question.
No whales can lay eggs. All mammals produce offspring, like live babies.
So the things that unite mammals, with the exception of platypus and echidna, which are their own really weird kind of older mammals, they lay eggs. Every other mammal has live birth. All mammals have hair of some kind. Even if like a whale, most of it is gone, they'll have whiskers or something. And all mammals give milk. It's literally where the name comes from. So we give milk to our babies. That's the unifying mammal characteristic. But no eggs for our whales, we promise. That would shock biologists. That would upend all of biology science. If we found a whale that laid eggs, we'd all be really freaked out. So great question, guys. All right, Miss Swan's class, there you are again. Hello. How deep do they swim? Do we have a measure of how far down they go? What do we know?
Oh, that's a great question. So I don't have exact numbers for you, but I will say that beluga, for example, tend to stay closer to shore, whereas narwhals are really deep diving mammals. So they tend to stay in deeper waters. Bowhead whales are, I guess you could say, similar to narwhal. They spend time in deeper waters as well. But I think it depends also at the time of year when they're migrating and that kind of stuff. But yeah, I don't have exact numbers for you.
Yeah, this question caused me to look up something, which is the deepest whale dive. So I know sperm whales go miles down, but there's a beaked whale we put a tracker on that went almost 10,000 feet down, which is totally ridiculous for an animal that has to breathe the air. Like it doesn't have gills. It can't go down there and just stay down there. 10,000 feet. Humans, we'd be very dead. Like if people tried that, even with the cutting edge gear for a person, you cannot get anywhere near that. So great question, guys. Jeez. Okay. We're going to take like 4 more together. Time flies and you're having fun in these broadcasts, but I will encourage all our classes, oceanweekcanada.ca, Canadian Ocean Literacy Coalition. There's so much there, including the rest of this broadcast series. We're going to head back to YouTube for a sec. Miss Riddle's class wants to know, how many different kinds of whales are you tracking? You highlighted a few at the beginning. Do we have any figure on that?
So the ones that we've specifically tagged, I don't know what number we're at right now, but I think it was around 15, don't quote me on these numbers, 15-ish in 2022 and maybe another 15-ish in 2023. And I don't think we got very many on last year. So just a handful and that's for bowhead whales. For belugas, I don't think we have any tagged at the moment and none for narwhal either.
Okay. Well, we'll have to get back out there and make sure you get all the good research to get some cool tags.
Exactly.
Awesome. We've got a great question. Have you seen any effects of climate change on belugas while being up in the Arctic?
Oh, that's such a good question. Have I seen any?
And it's worth noting I was going to say, it's worth noting this can be a no. This is the thing with climate change stories is that climate change is universally recognized, definitely happening. We want to make that very, very clear for all our students. And in fact, I really encourage you, ask your teachers, ask your family, ask your parents how much the weather has changed since they were kids. And they will tell you, even since Justine and I were kids, it's radically different than it used to be. But when you're up in the field, does the landscape look different at all? Do we notice beluga population numbers changing in any way? It's been almost a decade of research, but you might not have something very, very salient like that. Anything you want to share?
Yeah, so not necessarily. I guess I would say that, and I will say this, as researchers that live down south, we are not in the Arctic for the entire summer. So we don't necessarily get to see things like changes in springtime and fall. I'm in Manitoba, we see changes in how early spring happens and how late fall is happening. And those are being observed in the Arctic as well. So springtime is happening earlier in the Arctic and the ice is forming later in the fall. But I haven't personally seen any impacts, I guess, on belugas specifically, but those observations are being noticed from people that live in the Arctic full time.
Yep. It's a great answer. And I found too, World Wildlife Fund's done some neat stuff on this. So they have a whole Arctic sea ice beluga thing. If you want to take a look at that, it's some really, really neat stuff with regards to their migration as well. So again, climate change is something we're going to keep coming back to throughout Ocean Week Canada. And I really encourage you, check it out. And if you want extra research, we can find pretty much anything you want to find online. It's a great question, guys. All right, we're going to do two more before we wrap up and say farewell. Mrs. Swan's class, so many great questions. Here we are. Hey, guys. What is we'll do a rapid fire. We'll do both of your questions. What is your favorite whale? Do you have an individual favorite whale? Do you have a favorite kind of whale? Is it belugas? You don't need to tell us if it's not. You can wink.
Oh, this is so hard. It's funny because there's a running joke that my favorite whale is bowhead, even though I study belugas. So I love them all. They're all pretty amazing. I saw my first narwhal this summer, which was incredible. So I feel like I have no favorites.
Yeah. However, if it had been the beluga, I think you've been very clear about that. That's okay. That's okay for our beluga program. Very nice. I will say we get this question a lot for all manner of whale biologists. And my favorite, in case anyone's interested, the blue whale is the biggest animal to ever exist on planet Earth. It dwarfs the biggest dinosaur. So I've died to see one. It's one of the coolest things ever. That's my pick, although I haven't seen a bowhead whale, so maybe I'll have to get up, or northern right whale, all the cool stuff up in the Arctic. So great question, guys. All right, since that was fast, we'll do one more from Miss Swan, and we'll wrap up with one from YouTube. How fast do they swim? Do we have them, little pedometer for them, or what's the deal?
Honestly, that's a great question. I have no idea how fast they swim. I think it would also depend on what's going on in their environment at the time. So, for example, I've seen belugas swim away from boats or swim away from polar bears. So they're going a little bit faster at that time. But when they're just kind of going about their day, they're not super fast.
Yep.
They're just kind of leisurely. It takes a lot of energy to swim fast. And you don't want to expend a lot of energy when you are living in the wild.
When you're at home, if you want food, you go to the fridge and there's endless quantities of food in the fridge, hopefully. Beluga whales, they need to save that energy so that when they do need to catch food, they have the energy to do just that. So I love these kind of questions because they're all I was interested in as a boy. The biggest, the fastest, the strongest, all those things. And it's shocking that we really don't know that many things about really, really iconic animals. If you're keen as a biologist to put trackers on all the whales and see how fast they swim, you could be the person that leads that research, and Justine could be your supervisor in the future. So that's your plug of the day.
That sounds very fun.
We have not talked about this very much in the whole broadcast at all, and it's a great final question. Emma wants to know, why do they have the big bulbous noses or heads? What's the deal?
So those are called melons, and that's what they use to echolocate. So when they're trying to vocalize, they use the melon to kind of focus their sound on different things, and then the sound comes back, and then they're able to process it. So it's a way of they use it to vocalize.
I really don't know. If I were given the option of having a melon on my head, so I'd look really dorky, but I could echolocate, I think I'd choose to have the melon. Like, it's just really
pretty
cool. Yeah.
That is very cool.
Justine, it's been so fun having you on to help kick off our Ocean Week Canada celebration. Is there any final message you want to leave us with before we bring in our class to say a big thank you and farewell just about how cool belugas are or Arctic research is in general?
I guess I'll just say that if you love science, this is the funnest job. So chase your dreams and study hard. I guess that's my last thing, because it's so fun. And yeah, I think that if you really enjoy science, just kind of chase it, because I was the same, just like you, Jesse, like just grew up loving
the best
science. Yeah.
It's a message we get from people, from astronauts to cave divers, deep sea explorers, and beyond. Like, I mean, you get to work with the coolest people from around the world, an international community of people that are every bit as nerdy as you are. You get to play for work. You get to go to the coolest places. You get to like do your dreams, and you usually get paid pretty well too. So it's like all the good stuff all at once. I really encourage you, classes, check out the rest of our series. If you want to hear more stories like Justine's, this has been so much fun. I'll pass along a bunch of extra beluga info to all our registered classes today. But Justine, we're going to bring in our classes on YouTube. Miss Swan's class had to head off to their next period. But if you're on YouTube and you want to scream and yell and annoy the principal, you have our permission. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your day.